There have been so many wonderful horror movies over the last 10 years, this entire decade, but in 2019 specifically, a few that have hit me really hard and will end up in my top 10 movies overall in 2019. Today, we're not just talking about the good, we are talking about all of the horror movies I have seen and counting them down from my least favorite to my most favorite. And the most important part of this video is I need your input down below. What horror movies have you seen? Which ones did you love? Which ones did you hate? If you have your list, be sure to put it down below and hit that thumbs up button if you like this genre-specific countdown. Today we're talking 38 horror-based films. Now, just because this movie is partially horror does not mean it's all the way horror. We're going to have some horror comedies here, some movies that feel a bit more in the thriller world, and ones that I definitely agree with. But if it says horror on Letterboxd, and that's the website we're using to count these down, it will be a part of this countdown. I've seen 38. I'm sure many of you have seen much more. Like I said, we're going to start with these stinkers. We're going to move our way up, and as it normally goes, these are just my favorites in the order of how I personally responded. There's no way that your list of 38 is going to match up with my list of 38. Coming in at number 38, The Haunting of Sharon Tate, one of my personal least favorite movies of the year because it takes the character, the real-life person of Sharon Tate, does not go in a Once Upon a Time in Hollywood direction, tries to take it in a horror direction, but the horror falls flat. That's not even the worst part of this movie. It's the atrocious dialogue and the line delivery and the fact that it feels like a satire, a spoof, but it's not. The movie's taking itself so seriously. The Haunting of Sharon Tate, easily one of the worst movies I have seen all year. I do believe it's available on Amazon Prime. Next up is Doomi Annihilation, the reboot of the Doom franchise, because if they didn't make this movie, they were going to lose the rights. You can tell that when you're watching it. It is a horror movie because I think of the elements that were supposed to work, and they're horrifyingly bad. The line delivery, the crazy, horribly CGI'd action, nothing about this movie works. It's not entertaining. It felt like a higher-budgeted fan film, which some may like. I thought it was garbage. Next up, at number 36, Wounds. I just recently watched Wounds. I believe it was on Hulu. It's a Hulu original film. And it's got a reasonably decent cast. You have Dakota Johnson. You have Armie Hammer. Wounds is not good. Wounds is trying to be a different spin, a different take on a horror movie. We're gonna talk about a lot of studio horror on this list. Wounds is not that. It tries to be artistic. The problem is, does not succeed. It's very boring. It's extremely dull until it's supposed to be exciting, and you get no answers to any of your questions in the final act, and it just felt like a waste of time. That's what Wounds was for me, as you can see with my 1.5 out of 5 stars. Another 1.5 out of 5 stars is Countdown. We're talking about studio horror. This is the prime, horribly executed studio horror movie of 2019. This is an example of what other horror movies should strive to not be. We're going to talk about our Annabelles. We're going to talk about our La Lloronas, but Countdown did nothing right? Everything tries to be overly spectacular, but it's just so cliche. There is a tiny bit of fun to be had with some of the characters and the line delivery. I'll give you that one. But overall, Countdown is what horror movies should not be. I can't believe we're still getting things like this in 2019. At number 34, The Influence. All right, it's a 2 out of 5 star movie. A little bit better, I guess. But Countdown, The Influence is still something that you probably want to avoid at all costs. It is a foreign film, and they play on that ethnic background of these characters, and they have some reasonably decent lore, and there are some moments in here that make this stand above the movies below it, but The Influence is still cliche, still conventional. You're going to hear those words a lot on this list, and other than some solid imagery, I remember nothing from The Influence. Absolutely nothing. Story did not stick with me. It was a very dull experience. This is a recent one, Rattlesnake on Netflix, 2 out of 5 stars. Rattlesnake attempted to give us a really cool story. And I'll admit, the story is cool. The woman's child is bit by a rattlesnake. She has to make a deal with the devil of sorts, and the devil sends her out on this mission. But then it's just 45 minutes of nothing. It's just searching for a person to do the mission for, and it's like, that's it? Just a lot of conversations and nothing. The final 5 minutes were cool, but it was too late at that point. At number 32, 47 Meters Down Uncaged. Yeah, the first one was rough for me. The second one was rough for me. I do think the second one was better than the first one, because the second one at least knows exactly what it's supposed to be and tries to execute on that and doesn't worry as much about the really bad dialogue and horrible character development as the first one did. But it's still there. It's still present. You don't care who lives or dies. Some entertaining moments that I think some horror fans are going to respond to. I wasn't one of those people, unfortunately. Number 31 is Corporate Animals. Now, this is a movie where a CEO takes some coworkers and assistants into a cave. It's supposed to be this bonding experience between all of the friends, right? But then something happens. They get stuck in the cave, and the horror ensues. This is not a pure horror film. There are just horrifying elements, but it's mostly a comedy. It's like a horror, thriller, trapped comedy. But I didn't really like the story. It's very odd, not in a funny way. A lot of the jokes did not land, and you just feel like you want to escape this movie as the characters want to escape the cave. All right, dropped on VOD, did not get a theatrical release, and I think I can see why. We talked about The Curse of La Llorona. This is another studio, a pure studio horror film that does nothing else. We have some horror comedies on here. We have some that try to be different, but this one did not try to be different. It did not attempt to do anything new. It is your classic jump scare-filled horror fest in the Conjuring universe. That's what it is, and it doesn't do anything outstanding. It didn't really do anything memorable. I liked the performances. That's about it. And I can't believe this movie came out this year. This feels like it came out 2 years ago. I kid you not. And I'm sure we'll encounter other movies like that. Oh, there it is. Annabelle Comes Home. Annabelle Comes Home. When did this movie come out? Was it this year? Because I sure don't remember it. Not a lot of memorable moments for Annabelle Comes Home. And it really is a shame because the last Annabelle, not the first was bad, but the last one was a bit better. And I'm like, oh, okay. The Annabelle movies are back, baby. We've had a bad one, a good one, and unfortunately, a bad one again. This was supposed to be like the haunted house of the Annabelle world. All of these things come to life, and they're stuck inside while the parents are away. The Warrens, the characters that I love, and no, it's just such a repetitive film. And I hate when a horror movie just feels like you're doing the same thing, the same shtick, the same camera movements. Oh, no, jump scare. Camera movement. Oh, no, jump scare. And Annabelle Comes Home. It's frustrating me. As did Pet Sematary. Now, if you remember to my review, I believe I gave Pet Sematary rounding to a 2.5 out of 5 stars. I've since downed it a bit because I just, I look back at this movie and I realize how conventional it actually was, how predictable the entire experience ended up being, and how I got nothing new, nothing different from this film. Pet Sematary was such a bust because I loved the trailer. It's Stephen King, based on a Stephen King movie that a lot of people hold close to their hearts. And this remake, I'm like, yes, this is a thing, a movie, a property, a franchise, primed for a remake. And it should have served it well, but it didn't. It was bland, it was dull, it was forgettable. Pet Sematary did not stick with me whatsoever. Okay, Don't Let Go. You may be looking at this and being like, is that the Blumhouse film where the guy is caught in a time loop and he's trying to save his... Well, it's listed under the horror genre on Letterboxd, so it's on here. And there were some horrifying elements, especially when you look at how he's dealing with, throughout the movie, deaths of young family members. So that's kind of traumatic. I don't really see it as much as a horror movie, but if we're going by the standards that I said at the beginning of this video, sure, Don't Let Go was forgettable. Not a lot to it. Some good performances, but that's really about it for me. Next up, here's one that's a bit controversial. This is The Dead Don't Die. A lot of people enjoyed The Dead Don't Die. I just found it a little bit bland. Bill Murray. I like the director. I like Bill Murray. I like Adam Driver. Some of this dry humor did work, but then some of the dry humor didn't work, and we get set out on these different paths that never really tie together. The Selena Gomez storyline is a prime example for me. It's like, why was that in this movie? It all just felt a bit meaningless, a bit pointless. I really didn't get anything out of it. Obviously, I'm on the other side of the fence from a lot of people because many loved The Dead Don't Die. It's just one of those movies for me. Didn't quite capture me. And it's not one I'm going to go back to. The Prodigy. This has been a year of The kids are either possessed, or the kids are evil, or the kids are a bad version of Superman. A lot of bad kids. The Prodigy is the worst one, and here's why. I don't remember a lot from The Prodigy. Gave it a 2.5 out of 5 stars. It's not horrible, but it's not all that good. It's not all that memorable. Some reasonable performances, and I remember the kid's performance. He was good, but nothing else about this movie stood out. And that's what you're going to see about a lot of these horror movies. In the Tall Grass, another failed Stephen King adaptation, in my opinion, nothing stood out. You have some entertaining scenes in this movie. The idea of these people going in the tall grass, getting stuck and unable to realize, where they are, when they are, who's talking to them, who's calling out. But then you get into the third act, and it's like, wait a second. What? I've seen some people try to come up with explanations for this film. Sure. Not one for me, I'll say that. Everything was so over the top in that third act, and it felt very Stephen King, just not in a good way. This one is called Suzzanna Buried Alive. I won't spend too much time on it. I actually liked this a bit more when I first saw it, and then I started to think about it. I'm like, no, this is a movie disguised as something else when it ends up being that movie. The movie that you didn't want it to be, but it has this pretty packaging, and the story is interesting, and they tell it in a different way, and it's all about this woman who gets buried alive and comes back and haunts these people, and sure, it is a remake of another movie, sure. And when I first watched it, I was kind of entertained. Then I thought about it a bit more, and I'm like, well, that's kind of full of cliches and maybe even more conventional than I said it was in my review. And I don't want to spend too much time on it because this movie has its fans, and I'm just on the other side of the fence, and it did not stick with me whatsoever. When a movie does not stick with me, I'll usually go back and reevaluate how I felt about it, because that is a big part, especially of a horror film. And Eli is another one. Man, the debate with Eli was crazy, because my review was so split down the middle. It's like some people loved the ending, some people hated the ending, some people loved the beginning, some people hated the beginning. To me, Eli's just another one. It's just another horror movie. It's the same old thing. Now, I do appreciate how it tried to do something different at the end. Not that it worked, but I appreciate the effort. But by that point, it was too late. Another Netflix. You've seen a trend of mediocre Netflix horror films. Got those all throughout the year. And Eli was another one that did not stick. Man, this is such a shame. And Velvet Buzzsaw is higher than I think a lot of people will put it at. Velvet Buzzsaw is not a pure horror film. It's more like a thriller. It's from the director of Nightcrawler, Dan Gilroy, Jake Gyllenhaal, a really great cast, Toni Collette, John Malkovich, and it's about these events happening to these different... I don't even want to go into it because it gets wacky. It gets crazy. This movie is over the top. Features some really cool violence, some incredibly tense moments, not all that many scares, and just not a memorable story. It's crazy that this came from the director of Nightcrawler. And then we get Velvet Buzzsaw, and Gyllenhaal's performance was great, but not a lot in this movie to sink your teeth into. And that's a real shame. Okay, so out of the 2.5 out of 5 stars, this one's the best one. A lot of people liked Escape Room. I didn't hate Escape Room. I found a bit of fun in it. I'm actually I'm kind of excited to see the next movie. I still think it is silly. It is fun, but it's silly. It's full of issues. It's unevenly paced. It did not quite get all the way there for me, but I see potential in it. And I see potential in where it's going in the next one. I really didn't like the way this movie ended, but Escape Room is not the worst I've ever seen. Even though it's clearly 2.5 out of 5 stars, it's the best one on this list. Now we get into the 3 stars. The Hole in the Ground. This is an A24 film. It's another one about a young child. Well, not as much about a young child, but some weird things are happening. And one of the weird things is that there's a hole in the ground. This movie is shot well. It looks really good. It's not a studio horror film, and I respect that. But it's also very slow in an uneven way. It's a bit boring. It's not one I want to go back to. It's not an A24 horror film that hit really hard for me. It doesn't do what it intends to do, and that's a real shame. Number 18, Them That Follow. So I like aspects of Them That Follow. It's not really a horror film. I would not classify it pure horror, but it has horrific elements to it. It's about this young girl whose family, well, really everyone that's surrounding her, they're a part of this religious organization that is sacrificed. Well, that is allowing snakes to run over top of their bodies, and if they see the demon in you, they're going to bite you. If they bite you, they're going to do this, and that's a scary thing to be a part of. And it really did nail that aspect. What I wanted it to hit on, it hit on. It's just another one that wasn't all that memorable to me. Performances, really good. Caitlin Dever? I never know if I say that name right. She's great in the movie, and it really is very well acted. But Walton Goggins is great. But it's not a story that stuck with me, unfortunately. And the same case goes with Child's Play. Now, here's what I'll say about Child's Play. We're in the fresh movies now. So all of these films that I'm talking about as of this moment and up are fresh. Child's Play is a fresh film for me, and I never imagined myself saying that. I saw that first trailer, I'm like, nope. Why are you remaking that? What's the point? Then I started thinking about it, I'm like, okay, bringing it into the modern age, you have Mark Hamill as Chucky, and I like the cast, and I like the director, and it's like, okay, I'm in. And the movie worked. It's fun. Is it silly? Yes. Is it predictable? Of course. Does the third act work all the way? No. Child's Play reboot surprised me, and that's pretty impressive. Scary stories to tell in the dark. One that did not surprise me because it ended up being as good as I expected it to be. I didn't think this movie was going to be great, and it wasn't great. And it wasn't even all that good, but it was okay. It was okay. Some great physical horror. The practical effects were fantastic. The body horror is awesome. Some really standout scary moments in this movie, man. I think to that scene in the hospital with the lights, and I'm just like, dang. It's the fact that I couldn't get as much on board with these kids as I could, say, the Losers Club in It, or pretty much any of the modern popular kids groups and movies. I just didn't really care about these kids as much. Therefore, I didn't care about the story as much. And they do solve this problem fairly quickly at the end of the movie. And I don't even remember how they did it, so it wasn't all that memorable for me. But the movie itself, it's not bad. I got something out of it. Next up is Brightburn. Another kid is bad. The kid's going to do things. Brightburn handles it better than the Prodigy. Better than the Hole in the Ground. It is what it says it's going to be. It's kind of a spoof on what if Superman turned bad instead of good. And I like that. Not a spoof. It was scary. And it takes itself very seriously. I think what this movie was missing was James Gunn's direction. It has James Gunn's producing, which is great, and you can feel that. But it was missing his direction because the story itself was a little sloppy, a little cliche. Full of some things that, I've just seen 1,000 times before, and I thought they were going to refrain from putting it in this movie. But it did show potential for this world that Gunn is clearly trying to build, especially if you stay after those credits. Okay, let's face it. Ma is ridiculous. Ma's ridiculous. And I know that says 3.5. That may be one that I take down to 3 stars, right? Because I think I gave it a 65, a 66%, which rounds to 3.5 stars. But I may take it down to like a 64, just because we talk memorability. Like, how much do I remember watching this movie? And while Ma, I had fun with Ma. I ain't gonna lie to you. Spencer's performance, Octavia Spencer, ridiculous. And the whole concept of the movie is ridiculous. It's silly. But I kind of appreciated it for what it was going for. She was scary. I'll give her that. And she just owned that entire movie. I'll probably take it down to 3 stars, though. It wasn't bad. I mean, I liked the movie, but just enough. It wasn't a standout for me. Out of all of the 3 stars that we've talked about, and even over Ma, because while I think this one is a bit, it has more issues than Ma, maybe, I had more fun with Happy Death Day to You. I can't quite get it to that 3.5. I need to see it again, though, because this is one that stuck with me longer than I thought it was going to. It is definitely a rehash of the first Happy Death Day, but we're back with these characters, we're back in these situations, and frankly, I love being here. They're not making another movie. The director came out and said that. Unfortunately, they have not greenlit another film, and that's a bummer, man, because this franchise is really fun. Really fun, and Happy Death Day to You stuck with me over all of those other 3-starred films. It did, and that's why it's at the top of that portion of the list. Next up is Little Monsters. I said we're going to have some comedy in here. Is Little Monsters a horror film? No. But you got zombies. I guess that's what classifies it as horror on Letterboxd. And I had fun with Little Monsters. This is, in my opinion, a step above the movies below it. It is very well made. Great performances. Lupita Nyong'o kills it in this movie. Josh Gad is ridiculously over the top, but he's entertaining. And I liked this movie, man. It's available on Hulu right now. I recommend it. I really do. It's one of those, if you like a good horror comedy, check it out. There's another horror comedy we're going to talk about here soon, too. This is tough because my 11 and my 10, they're fighting hard. Haunt is a straight-to-VOD film that I swear to you will end up as a cult classic. I really do believe that. Haunt was so surprising. I thought this movie was going to be bad. It was good. It is basically, what if the haunted house was actually... What if the haunted house struck back? That's what I'll say. This group of kids, they go in a haunted house, and it's haunted. Like, in the scariest way possible. Good thrills, good chills. Don't really want to talk about the script, because it's not all that good. Nothing stood out about the direction. Sure. We'll put the technical aspects to the side. If you're a horror film, you're going to love Haunt, because you're not going to look at that other stuff that I look at. That brings my score down. You're going to love Haunt. It's tough to put that below It Chapter 2. I liked It Chapter 2 more than others. I did. Good moments. Great cast. Bill Hader was phenomenal. They all matched the kids perfectly. What I didn't like about the movie is when they did go back to the past with the kids, and they CGI'd them to look younger, and some of it looked awkward, and it was off, and it felt weird, and it was detached, and so many scenes in this movie that did not fit with the rest, but then you have so many scenes that were fantastic. And it was a fun movie. I had a fun time in the theater. I'm not going to lie to you. And there were moments that are going to stick with me for a long time, especially with Pennywise. But it did fall short of the original. Very short from the original, in my opinion. I like the original, the first one. Well, not the original. The first It of this decade so much more than this one. But it wasn't bad. I enjoyed myself. Next up is Crawl. Talking about enjoying yourself. Oh, my goodness. Crawl blew my mind. Did not think I was going to like this movie on this level, but I did. It's everything you want this kind of movie to be and more. Sam Raimi, his producing is just, you can just feel his touch all over it, and then I thought the direction was solid, great performances. It's what you want, man. You got all these alligators, crocodiles, one of them coming in here and just eating people. And that's what you want. And they're moving their way up this house, up the levels. And it was just thoroughly entertaining, man. If you want an entertaining horror ride, one that's going to surprise you, it's ridiculous, okay? But it embraces it. And it doesn't act like it's much more serious than it actually is. And I can't stand when movies do that. Crawl didn't do that. It was really fun. The perfection. It's not perfection, but the perfection. Oh, my goodness. Allison Williams is just a beast of an actress. I don't even want to say anything about this movie. It's wacky. It's crazy. It's unlike anything else you're going to see in 2019, but it's intriguing, and it stuck with me. And my God, her performance when she's panicking during... Watch it. It's worth it. Zombieland Double Tap. This is the sequel that really delivered. Talked about horror comedies. This is a horror, but more comedy, right? And I think it capitalized well on the first film. And I really enjoyed my time in the theater, man. All the performances are great. I think the chemistry is even better in this movie than the first. I still prefer the first film. I think the first film is better. But Zombieland Double Tap is a worthy sequel to a classic zombie film at this point. But the surprise of the year may be Ready or Not. Ready or Not was a freaking blast. A freaking blast. We moved from the 3.5 to the 4 stars. And let me tell you, if this is not a 4-star movie, I don't know what is. Did not expect this to be so good. A lot of it has to do with Samara Weaving and her performance, but it's basically just her trying to escape from this psychotic family who's trying to kill her because they're a part of a cult. Yes, please. More of a thriller than a horror film. Not a lot of jump scares, but I like that. It's not a perfect movie. Some moments that I did not love, but Ready or Not, here I come. That's stupid. I've been talking for a long time. Okay. Now we're getting into my kind of horror. So my kind of horror, just in case you're not aware, is the very artistic, the stuff that not your average audience member is going to like. The stuff that they're going to walk out and the cinema score is going to be like a D+, right? That's my kind of stuff. The stuff that makes you think. Not the movie that I'm going to forget in 5 minutes, like an Annabelle or a La Llorona. Something like a Climax. And if you do not like artistic films, don't watch Climax. What's the plot of Climax? I still don't know. But if this wasn't just an artistic, transfixing movie that just put me in a world that I've never been in before, and if this tells you anything, the opening credits, or maybe even the logo, I can't remember, they don't come in until 45 minutes into the movie. I've never seen anything like this. A24, if that doesn't tell you something, we'll talk more A24 here in a bit, but Climax, whoa, wow, what a trip. What a trip this movie was. Dr. Sleep. The more I think about Dr. Sleep, the more I enjoy it, both as a sequel to The Shining and as a capitalization on the novels. The performances were magnificent. I really liked Rebecca Ferguson. I liked our young girl. She captivated me. She was incredible. And just, this is kind of like Stephen King's superhero movie, man. It really is. It feels like a superhero film. You have the bad guys. You have the good guys. The good guys are going after the bad guys. The bad guys go after the good guys. And then at the end, we reflect. We reflect on one of the greatest horror films of all time in The Shining. And I thought it all came together brilliantly. And Dr. Sleep, man, stuck with me. I saw it last week. I haven't stopped thinking about it. Number 3 is Us. Us is very good. Great. I loved it. I loved Us. As a follow-up to Get Out, I still think Get Out is better. It is the better film. For sure. But Us is not too far. Okay. Well, it's not too far behind the better horror movies of this year, at least. If you didn't understand it, I didn't understand all of it. If you weren't on board for how outlandish certain elements were, I'm with you. They're weird. This movie's weird. It's strange. It's one you have to think about. It's one you have to embrace and accept and reflect upon and think about a bit more. What do the rabbits mean? Was it actually the clone the entire time? What the heck kind of voice is Lupita Nyong'o doing? A lot of things to think about with this film. But in my opinion, Us stuck with me way more than some of these movies lower down on the list. Even though it's weird, it's artistic, and it's Jordan Peele. Jordan Peele is, at this point, one of the best horror directors working. I know he's only made 2 movies, but that's all it takes sometimes. And for me, Us was a standout of this year. Okay, number 2, The Lighthouse. I know. Why isn't it number 1? They have flipped, I can't tell you how many times. Let's just go ahead and do the reveal. Let's do number 1. I can't tell you how many times Midsommar and The Lighthouse have flipped. And honestly, when you see my top 10 movies of the year, 1, expect these 2 movies, maybe these 3 movies on that list. And 2, you may see a different order. I have to see them both again. Here's why I put Midsommar at number 1. Midsommar haunted me and creeped me out in a way unlike any other movie I've ever seen. Okay, I could say the same thing about The Lighthouse. They're both brilliant. But Midsommar, the first 15 minutes, when we're talking pure horror, what Florence Pugh's character has to go through is pure horror, and it's the best opening scene to a movie I've seen in 2 decades. I'm not kidding. I kid you not. And I think a lot of people will tell you that. They may think the movie falls apart. They may think it goes off the edge towards the end of the film. But I've actually talked to a lot of people who maybe I didn't expect would love this movie as much as I did. My cousin, for example, love her to death. She may not see near as many movies as this psychopath right here. I'm like, you saw Midsommar? Yep. You probably didn't like it. No, I loved it. Really? You loved Midsommar? And I would have never expected like a general audience member to love this movie. She liked it more than Hereditary. I can't go that far. But Midsommar, I think, is sticking with a lot of people. Many are going to hate it, and I get it. Movies are art forms. Not everyone's going to like the same art form. I understand that. With The Lighthouse, you look at the performances. Really, the performances for both movies. Florence Pugh, Jack Rayner, gosh. But Robert Pattinson, Willem Dafoe. Oh, man. Oh, my gosh. I could watch these 2 for days, man. For days. They were so good. And the cinematography for both films, flawless. The score for both movies, fantastic. Everything about both of these movies, 2 very different, both A24 artistic films. Once again, that's the kind of horror movie that I like. 2 very different movies, both impacting me in such a way to where it's really hard to give you guys a number 1, a definitive number 1 right now. Right now I'm saying Midsommar at 1, Lighthouse at 2. Daggone if those don't change when I get to see both of those movies for a second time. That's it, guys. That's the list. Not going to keep you any longer. Those are all of the horror, comedy, horror, crazy horror thrillers that I've seen all year, ranked from my least favorite to my most favorite. That's the video. I appreciate you guys watching. Let me know, is there a horror movie that you saw that you would put on this list? I definitely missed a ton. And what are your favorites? What are your least favorites? If you enjoy this video, hit that thumbs up. Many more things coming this week, along with some Rick and Morty talk, some Disney Plus talk, and Watchmen tomorrow. Be on the lookout. See ya!